Thanks for joining us on Coast to Coast Pest Talk.
All right, guys, thanks so much for tuning in to Coast Pest Talk. I am your host, Gabe Seymour with Pest Patrol, joined here by our co-host, Andy Sinevsky with Perimetech Pest Management in Syracuse, New York. Is that Syracuse?
Actually, you kind of said it like a native Syracusan. That was pretty good.
I was born in... No, just kidding. I wasn't. I was born in California. So today we're going to be discussing what I wanted to call it was how to fire customers, but we're actually going to be calling it curating your client base, which is much better sounding than what I was thinking.
It might be more diplomatic, maybe.
Yeah.
How to fire customers. Oh my God.
So walk us through, can you even do this? Isn't firing customers kind of just mean? And what are we talking about here?
Yeah. So I kind of renamed this curating because I started to look at what we do, and we do a lot of things that are aside from just like, I think that everybody, if you're in business long enough, you're going to run into mismatches between yourself and certain clients, and you have to part ways. And over the years, we've had less and less need for that because we started to institute things further upstream. So what I mean is, like, earlier on in the client acquisition process, we're instituting things that will head off and redirect some of these problems before they get downstream, where we go, holy cow, we really got to have a reckoning with, eliminating a client from our client base. So for us, it really starts like pre-sale, like right off from the first phone call. Everything that we're doing is trying to figure out whether or not that person is going to be a good match for us. It's almost like interviewing a client. Like, you think that the phone rings, it means that we want to do everything we can to get that business, but really it's, hey, are they a good match? Are we gonna work out well? So we want to screen them right off the bat. We're looking for suitability between us and them. We've come to a place where if we decline everything that isn't a perfect match for our service niche, so we don't want to ever extend ourselves into things that aren't exactly in our wheelhouse. So if somebody calls and needs something like that's just outside of what we really do well, we're going to refer them out to somebody else, to a specialist that can do that. So like we don't do, like, say, nuisance wildlife. That's easy because we're not licensed for nuisance wildlife. So we immediately refer that to one of our nuisance wildlife operators. And everything that's not like right in that main wheelhouse. We also, on that pre-sale side of things, we start setting the expectations right off the bat. People on the phone, when we're talking to, call-in stuff, or when we're on commercial estimates, we're setting the expectations of what they can expect to see and what we're going to do and what the results are anticipated to be, so that down the road, people are listeners of varying quality. So sometimes they don't listen great. And so you have to kind of keep reiterating these. We have our technicians, same thing. When we show up on site, we're immediately setting expectations right off the bat again. And they're going to hear the echo of the same thing that they heard on the phone. Here's what we can do. Here's what we can accomplish. Here's how long you're going to have to wait 14 days to see results, or whatever the situation is. What I'm looking for on the front end pre-sale is red flags. So if there's anything that pops up, aside from it being outside our service niche, what I'll look for is on the commercial side, if we get RFPs, requests for proposal, or requests for quote, bids, or people that are quote shopping, and we don't know anything about these, like RFPs and bids and things beforehand, it's probably not a match for us. Like, we'll get, a cold government bid that comes in, email or call or something like that. If we're just one of the 3 bids they have to get, and we don't know anybody at that account, we haven't had any discovery meetings, we don't know anything about what's going on, you might as well just throw a dart at a wall with a price on it. Like there's
Right.
no way we're gonna work on that. I look for people that are vendor hopping as well. So sometimes we'll go out and you'll do a quote and we'll find equipment from 5 different companies, and they're all like within the last 2 years or something. And
Right.
I immediately go, am I that much smarter than these 5 other companies that were already here using similar types of materials and equipment? Is it likely that I'm going to be able to solve this problem and meet this client's expectations, or is this a client problem? It
Right.
immediately, and then that'll just, it doesn't mean necessarily that I don't provide a quote on that or I walk away immediately, but it means that my line of questioning then becomes very specific to kind of drill down. What was the problems that you were having? What are you looking for? What are you trying to do? What are you trying to accomplish? Because that vendor hopping makes me nervous every time. And
Yeah, they
obviously,
leave 3 other vendors. Why wouldn't they hop from you to the next guy?
totally, and it could be service performance issues, of course, but I think a
Yeah.
lot of times there's non-payment issues.
Right.
People will go for a couple months, see how long they can string along one provider, not pay them, and then get canceled because they weren't paying, and then call the next one down the list.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I look out. I certainly look out for that. And then of course, unrealistic expectations. If people call and say that they want things done in timeframes that just aren't possible, or unrealistic demands, if they're very specific. We had a person, oh my gosh, a number of years ago, that had like, we had like a 5 or 10 minute window that we had to show up at the house. We had to park in a certain place in the driveway. We had to honk the horn one time, wait for the maid to come to the door to unlock it. And then once we saw her, she would wave, and then we could get out of the truck and then walk to the door. Like,
What in the world?
it was unusual for sure. They're not a customer anymore. They were one that we did have to separate
Yeah.
from.
Right.
But some of those unusual demands like that, we're real keen to look out for that. And really, if we boil it down, it comes down to really meeting 3 criteria if you're going to be a client of ours. You have to be in our niche of what we do well. We have to be likely to meet or exceed your expectations. I have to look at that and say, yeah, there's a good chance we're going to at least meet them, but probably exceed what you expect us to do. And then, is it a job that if we take that job, we're likely to grow goodwill toward the brand? So to me, what I think is interesting I never include in there is it a lot of money?
Right.
To me, that doesn't factor in to whether or not I take the job. Like, if we're going to walk away from a job, it's not the amount of money. It's really those three things. Is it what we do? Can we meet or exceed the expectations, and will it grow goodwill towards our brand? And it really just comes down to those 3, pre-sale to determine.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm reminded of, the Marcus Sheridan's book, They Ask You Answer. Have you seen him around?
I don't think I have. No.
He's a kind of a marketing guy, a lot of stuff on kind of content creation, and big on transparency in terms of like, just answer like the main concerns your customers have, seek to answer those on your website or in your service material or whatever, so that they don't feel like you're just holding all your cards super close, right? Mm-hmm. And one of the things, he ran like a pool company, I think he still runs it, and they would have their customers, before they would ever come out and give them a quote, they'd have them read like a 50-page packet, and they'd like send them a PDF, and they're like, read this, and if at the end of this you think we'd be a good fit for you, then give us a call, we'll come out. And that was like a prerequisite, and you'd think that would just tank everything, but what they found was it actually did a lot of their sales process for them, and it eliminated all the bad customers, right?
Wow.
And that kind of reminds me of what you're doing. You set up these parameters, and my gut when I hear that, because we don't have as strict parameters set up, although I think we're going that direction, but my gut is like, oh, you're going to lose, that's so much opportunity. Couldn't you lower the standards and still service them? And yeah, but I think what you end up getting is just a higher quality customer.
I think you're absolutely right. And one of the things that we noticed, because we're really keen to measure everything. We'll have like a gut feel of how things are shaking out, but then I want to quantify it with some kind of data. And when we go back and look at year by year, we'll look at like how many extra visits or extra attention clients needed. And
Yeah.
sometimes we'll have a certain service line. Let's say, I don't know, like a rodent service or something. And we'll think to ourselves, geez, we're having really like a rash of a lot of extra calls on this, and we're having to go back for follow-ups and do all these things. And then we're like, oh geez, should we raise the price of the rodent service? Should we do it as a different type of multi-part type service, or should we make changes in our service? When we go back and look at it, almost invariably you have a very small minority of accounts that are
Yeah.
causing all the problem. Like you'll have
Yeah.
one account that you have to go back to weekly for 10 weeks or something because
Yep.
you're babysitting that customer and you're spending tons of time on that one customer, when you have 100 customers that you went one time and fixed the problem and you don't have to go back. So I think on the front end, if you pre-screen out some of these, the loss that you have in shunning away certain jobs, you make all that back on, everything runs smoothly. You don't need all those extra visits. You don't need all the babysitting, the office taking 10 phone calls to reconfirm and hold somebody's hand about things they don't understand.
Do you find with that, because yeah, there's multiple accounts that we're working on right now that fall into that category. Do you find that even as you pare stuff down to what you would consider like this is totally in our wheelhouse, are you still occasionally going to get those kind of customers or those
Yeah.
type of accounts that are just really
Mhm.
hard?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. We call them red marbles. So there's like I give this analogy sometimes. So let's say you have a big jar full of marbles, and there's 100 red marbles or 100 white marbles, and there's 10 red marbles. And all the service providers in our area, you close your eyes and you pick a marble out of the jar, and most of the time you're getting white marbles. Sometimes you're going to pick out a red marble. You pick out a red marble, now
Right.
you own this problem. And this problem is a customer that has unrealistic expectations. They have all kinds of problems. They're needy, and we all get our share of red marbles. It's just
Right.
you just can't help it. It's going to happen. And in the service performance, when we they pass through all of our like pre-screening type stuff, they get in there, we start doing service for them. We have to own those red marbles, and
Right.
we can't like pass them off necessarily. We have to sort of deal
You
with them.
can't throw the red marbles in the garbage can.
You can't look at them beforehand. No. So we'll actually say that around here. We'll be like, oh, I got a red marble here. And to us, it actually kind of, I think it helps, especially with the technicians, where they can get frustrated by things like this, where you'll
Right.
have, a client that is really highly demanding, and you're having to come back out and come back out, that they'll get frustrated that like, what am I doing wrong? And they'll, oh my God, Mrs. Smith called back, 8 times, and I'm going around and
Right.
doing everything I can. And if we give them like, nope, she's a red marble, and then it changes their mindset of like, okay, we've got to deal with this one. We know this is going to be a problem, and we have sort of protocols in place for that too, to deal with those. And I think that
Red
kind of,
marble protocols.
you like that, yeah, the red marble protocol. I got it from a book somewhere. I can't even remember where though. It was a sort of a different analogy, but it was kind of similar. But I was like, oh my God, that's exactly what's happening to us. But that kind of brings to the next phase of preventing firings of customers, is in the actual service performance. So we had our chance to avoid our red marbles, but well, we picked one. We got a problem one here.
Right.
What do we do during the service to prevent us from having to get to that point where we're firing them? To us, the first thing is that if we pick that red marble, if you take money for it, as soon as you take that money out of their hand, you own that problem. Like it's yours now. Like I've told our staff numerous times, if we have this problem, we're going to fix it. Okay. We're going to do everything we can to fix it. We're going to do things to an unreasonable level, because if the person
Right.
has an unreasonable expectation, we have to do unreasonable things to try to meet that in order to resolve this in an okay way. To me, unreasonable means not charging them extra, going way beyond our service guarantees,
Yep.
weekly services, no extra costs. We're like, we turn around and go towards those really problem ones. Instead of trying to back away or make excuses, we turn right around and face the problem and go at it. And that means like more communication. They'll get extra phone calls from us. They're going to hear from us so much that they're going to go, oh my God, these guys are just crazy. We're kind of
Right.
like out crazying the crazy customer. we're like complete zealots at that point. So we'll send 2 and 3 people service teams out to their house. We'll go every week. We'll do, we're going to figure out what's going on, or we're going to die trying. Now,
Yep.
part of what that does is it helps us to completely fulfill our service obligation. In our mind, we know that we way overdid our service obligation, but in their mind, when they paid us money and we own that problem, we need to way over earn it, so that even someone that's unreasonable will often go, yeah, I paid you $300, but my God, you guys had 3 guys here for a week for 8 weeks. Like I got way more than what I paid for. And in doing that, we're fulfilling our guarantee. We're fulfilling the scope of work we told them we would do. We're fulfilling the service term of it, whatever is the maximum we would possibly do. We're exceeding that. And in a lot of cases, we're helping walk them down an emotional road to get them to a place where they can feel okay of admitting, like, yeah, maybe I am being a little unreasonable. Maybe my expectations are a little high. Because through this whole process, we're giving them communication and feedback. And we're saying, these are the reasons why it's so difficult. This is what's going on. This isn't an easy to solve thing. This is, like we told you, this might be a problem that you need extra visit. Oh yeah. This has also worked when, I don't know if you've dealt with people with like delusory parasitosis or issues like that. This is also the same thing we kind of do in this arena, but obviously, so that if people hear this, and I don't want them to get the wrong idea, we're never making an application for delusory parasitosis. So delusory parasitosis is where somebody believes that they have a parasite or an insect pest, and they can outwardly exhibit, rashes and skin reactions, and they can be crazy, but there's nothing actually there. So never, ever, ever make an application in those situations. But what we have done is we've done extensive monitoring and worked with people to try to get them to ease us out of it. We've actually, one of the most remarkable ones we had was there was a lady in an apartment complex. She was convinced that she had these little black bugs that could fly and jump, but they would disappear when you got near them. And she would bring to us, she'd bring to the office of the apartment complex, like stuff that she said were these bugs. And it was little Ziploc bags with carpet fibers and torn up hair, paper and hair and debris, basically, from her floor. And she was on and off medication. Sometimes she'd be on her meds, sometimes she'd be off. What we did for the apartment complex was we did sort of a weekly monitoring thing. We would go in there, we'd check those monitors each time. Ms. Smith, we didn't find anything this time. I'm not seeing anything, so we're not going to be able to make out any application. And one of the things we started to do was started to talk to her about her life. And we'd see pictures on the wall. And one of the most remarkable moments I had with this client was there was a poster on the wall that was, I don't know if it was like Rod Stewart or something like that, or Bruce Springsteen, I don't know. And it was from a concert that was held at the Dome here in Syracuse, the Carrier Dome at SU. And I asked her about it. I was like, did you go to this concert? And she goes, oh my goodness, yeah, my husband and I, we went and it was 1984 and oh my God, it was the greatest time. And he died, a couple of years ago and this and that. And in this remembering herself and her story, she stopped and had total clarity and goes, I don't think I have any bugs here, do I? And I go, I don't think you do. I really don't think you
Whoa.
do. And it took about 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and she sort of slipped back into well, are you going to come back and check these bugs? I got them. And having some human connection and like, it was almost
Totally.
therapeutic for her, but it was sort of a moving moment that I was like, oh, wow, that really
Yeah.
affects people.
I got chills when you said that.
Nice.
That
Nice.
is so cool.
Yeah, it was pretty neat. The apartment complex was absolutely thrilled because their maintenance guy was just like pulling his hair
Yeah.
out on this whole thing, and they kept going with can't just spray water. That's always the one. And I go, look, man, you're introducing more issues and variables into this. If you start
Yeah.
making that you're making an application and then that application isn't working, it's not good enough, and now you're going to need to find another company to do it because we don't know what we're doing. Like you can't
Yes.
you can't lie to these people.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
got to kind of be sort of straight and truthful, but gentle. It's a
Yeah.
tough thing, but that's some of the ways during the service we'll try to wean ourselves out. Same thing happens with classic is noises, unidentified noises. So now let's say
Yeah.
you do all the right stuff. You end up with a red marble. You did all the service things you could. You ran at them. You tried to fix it, but it's just not working. Have you had to terminate a client at this point?
Yeah, certainly.
Okay.
I've probably terminated maybe 8 or 10 so far.
Wow.
3 years in, so not a ton. Um, and they're usually really, really, really bad clients.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So what was the trigger point for you? Like what was like, okay, these are the things that I'm not going to bend on.
Um, it would be so, you always have your share of clients that are just they're difficult, but they have a level of reasonableness to them. Like, hey, the issue's back. And you say, great, we'll get someone out there next week. They say, all right, thanks so much. And you go out the next week and hey, the issue's back. And you're like, great, we'll get someone out there next week. And they're like, thanks so much. These ones would be the ones where they'd be like, the issue's back. And you're like, all right, no problem. I'll get you scheduled for next week. They're like, I need you here today. You're like, well, we don't have any openings for 7 days, 5 days.
Yeah.
They're like, it doesn't matter. You need to be here today. Right. It's like those kind of people that are
Yeah.
just, you try your best to do what you can for them. But there's some people that the unreasonableness goes to a higher level than you can
Yeah.
accommodate.
Yeah. For us, we have sort of like four things that we look for.
Okay.
So non-payment right off the bat, because I wanted to sort
Yeah.
of like kind of
That's a big one
formalize this.
too.
Yeah, no, for sure. I wanted to kind of formalize this so it wasn't as much a just a hey, this person's annoying. I don't really like them. They're hard to deal with. You're going to have a lot of those.
Right.
And for the amount of times you have staff that come up and be like, "Oh, we got to fire this customer." And you're like, "Do we really? Let's talk about this. What happened?" Well, they were kind of short with me on the phone or whatever. You're like, "Well, okay. Let's maybe pull that back a little." But non-payment, I
Yeah.
think everybody can agree with. Like right off the top, if they're not paying, they're not a customer anyway. You can close that off. We look for anything where they're abusive or it's a dangerous situation. That's a deal breaker for us. Obviously, we've had a few customers that would be abusive on the phone, swearing and all kinds of things, and we'll be like, no, we're not gonna play that game. No, we're good there. And then on the dangerous side, we go into a lot of troubled neighborhoods, for
Right.
some of these multifamily housing situations and whatever.
Yeah.
And that's not usually too much of a concern, but we have had some landlords that have specifically thrown us under the bus
Yeah.
before we show up at a place, where we'll show up and there's, 10 angry tenants there that are losing it because the landlord has thrown us under the bus for whatever reason.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's a deal breaker right off. We'll definitely terminate that landlord. A mismatch of expectations. If we can't get them to understand exactly what our process is and what we're going to be capable of doing, they're gone. And any potential damage to the brand. So if it looks like, okay, this could blow up and be bad, and this isn't going to work, they're asking us to do things that are illegal or unethical, it could damage the brand, they're off the team. They're off the team. Now, when you've had to terminate somebody, how did you do it? What was the process?
I called them and said, usually my go-to has always been, hey, I don't think this is a good fit for us. Here's 2 other companies that I'd recommend you reach out to, and they may be able to help you out. And I sort of leave it at that. And then, and usually there's some level of pushback, and I kindly repeat, like, yeah, this just really isn't something that is a great fit for our company. And I'll generally try and give them some reasons. Often, I'll tell them, hey, you may consider reaching out to like a national brand like Terminex or Orkin, and they may have just more bandwidth to be able to accommodate those kind of specialty. They may be able to get somebody out there next day. I don't know, but I have a team of 3 guys, and we're booked out for 10 days. So
this makes me kind of laugh, because I'm thinking, I bet Orkin appreciates you just kicking it over to them. Oh my gosh.
Sorry, Orkin.
Here you go. You can have all my red marbles. No problem.
Another
toss it over to them. Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's a tough one, because we haven't given referrals coming off of letting a client go. Because I don't want to have a terrible client turn around and call another operator in town and say, oh yeah, Andy told me to call you guys up. And then they're terrible. We know that they're terrible. And they'll be like, yeah, they were here, 10 times and couldn't solve it and blah, blah, blah. And they're being a jerk to this new, and they're like, what? I almost feel like it's like sandbagging those people a little bit. Like,
that's a fair point.
You picked your red marble, they got their red marbles, you deal with them, and like, chips fall where they may. I'll say, you can call someone else, if you want service. I don't really know who to recommend, but
who would want to take you because you're red marble?
Yeah, exactly. I found that I almost always, it's a lot like when you have to let an employee go. I almost always do it via voice. Oh
yes. Yeah.
Usually it's a few instances it's been in person, but it's usually over the phone. I prefer having this conversation over the phone. Just security reasons. You're not on their property. Things can get crazy in person. So it'll be a phone call. Once we've determined, okay, that we've fulfilled what we need to fulfill, we'll come up with the terms of our separation. Sometimes we will write a check for the full amount. I've done things where, again, trying to be more unreasonable than they are, where we've done the complete service. We've done a million follow-ups. We've solved the problem, really. We know it's not a good match. And then at the end of that, when we're about to terminate them, we'll refund their entire money as well.
Yep.
From the beginning.
We've done that.
Because it really leaves absolutely no option for them to have any bad taste in their mouth about us.
Yeah. No liability on your side.
We did everything. If anyone looks at what actually occurred, the amount of service that we provided, and then gave them their money back, there can be no way that someone would be unhappy with that. I mean, unless we were negligent to the point where we were like purposely burning their house down or some nonsense. Like, there's no way that any person can say that there's a problem with that. But I'll do it on the phone. I'll also follow up with an email. And I love email. It's time-stamped. It's in writing. I'll follow up with all the things we discussed. I'll try to explain things in completely non-accusatory terms. And I'll usually
Yes.
take that on ourselves and say, you know what, I really feel bad we weren't able to meet your expectations. I feel terrible that this went the way it was. Nobody expected that we would end up here, but it's not going to work for us to move forward. So we're going to part ways and whatnot. Usually we have people will try to win back in. They'll say, well, what if we'll pay you more?
Right.
What if we paid you double? And we leave no opening for that, because for us there's no amount of money. It's
Yeah.
not a money issue to begin with, so that's not going to solve it.
Yes. Yeah. And like you said, your conditions that must be met, it's not a financial thing. And so if you've gotten to this point where you're on the phone with them, curating them,
Actively
then
curating.
yeah, regarding having that actual sort of termination conversation, and you mentioned it as well, similar to employees. And I would just add any sort of difficult confrontational conversation you have, always doing it in person or over the phone, unless it's necessary to document. Obviously, if it's something that's like you're afraid they're going to sue you or something, then documentation's obviously. But like with interpersonal or within your team or family, I'm so often when I don't want to talk to him in person because I'm afraid of doing it, and I want to send a text or I want to send an email, and like just forcing myself to dial the number and call them.
Yeah. No, so you got to go back to what, like episode 3 or something, or 4, talking about fear.
That's right.
And you got
right.
you got to sit down and write out like what's the best and worst case possibilities and what's the most likely. And I've never had, most of the time when I have to let a customer go, they are like, I'm so sorry. Oh, can I pay you more? Oh my goodness, blah, blah, blah. Some of them know, and they kind of see it coming. I've had people call me back like a week or 2 later and be like, tell me initially that, oh, you're terrible, whatever, and then call us back and be like, you guys are kind of awesome. Can you come back? And we're like, nah, we're sorry, But yeah, I think you're right. You're right. Like a conversation is usually ideal. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you have a protocol for your, say, a standard service technician to deny a service on site?
Okay, so
say for like an initial.
Yeah, that's a good question. I tell our team when they're going on site, if they feel uncomfortable about being there for any reason, we're not going to second guess them. We defer to the boots on the ground to make the call of and that goes for a lot of things. It's not just like, is this service the right service for this customer, but like, is it going to rain? Is the service can we perform the service safely without risk to people or pets or neighbors or whatever? So they can make that call at any point if they feel unsafe. If they, like, we've said the same thing for, heights, ladders, any of that. If you feel uncomfortable, you're more likely to have an accident. Something's more likely to go wrong if you're feeling uncomfortable. And we are never, ever, ever going to have you come back and say, well, I didn't do this job. I was worried about it. And then they're always scared about stuff, because then you're not actually okay with that. There's an implicit pressure to complete the job.
Yes.
It has to be without any reservations. If you say, hey, I thought it was going to rain, and on the label it says you can't do it within 24 hours of rain or whatever the case may be, so we didn't. You make the call. If it's too windy, if it's whatever, it was too high. Even if I go back there and judge it and go, nah, it's not bad. I can get a ladder up there. It's not really risky. With more experience, it's not risky. With less experience, it could be very risky. So I'm not going to make that call.
Or a different personality as well, right?
Totally.
Like you may have have 20 years of experience, and one person feels comfortable going up 40 feet, one person doesn't.
completely. Yeah. Well, and we had our first report of sort of a gender related issue with one of our technicians in the last week with our female
What's
technician.
that? What's that look like? Oh, like in terms of like her feeling uncomfortable.
Yep. Yep. And it was just some comments from a customer that were, inappropriate. That because she's a girl, and not like they were like inappropriate, like on a like romantic level, like not like, oh, you don't know what
Yeah.
you're doing because you're a girl, but like I can't remember the specifics, but and we talked to her about that, and like I told her, if you feel any uncomfortable, or you're it doesn't even have to be, and this is the other thing I tell, like especially with her, but with all of them, trust your gut instinct. It's
Yeah.
telling you things. Trust your spidey
Yeah.
sense. If your spidey sense is tingling, don't ignore it and think, well, I don't have anything specific to go on. I would much rather have you come back safe and the customer's mad because we have to reschedule the service and it's inconvenient for them, or not do the service, or they call somebody else. Like that loss is nothing. That $200,
Right.
$300, $400 service, whatever it is does not mean anything. You come back here safe. That's the most important.
Yep. Yep.
Because yeah, sometimes you'll get that tingle of like, your intuition's telling you something, and we should listen to it.
That gives me a lot of stuff to think about. I think that all of our many, many listeners to this podcast will actually,
Tens of
hey,
listeners.
by the time this drops, we may have a number of listeners. But I think this will be really helpful, really practical on the ground. I got a lot of stuff. I've just been taking a bunch of notes, a lot of stuff here that I'm going to be implementing for Pest Patrol here as well. Great, guys. Well, thanks so much for listening to Coast Pest Talk. As always, subscribe to our YouTube channel, subscribe to our podcast on whatever podcast catcher you use, and leave us some reviews. Reviews are really helpful. They let other people know how you like the show, and share this episode with one person that you think would benefit from this info. As always, thanks for listening.